Good evening, everyone. 33 years in 31 days, day 8, looking at 1997. Thank you for dropping in. Those of you that are here now, replay viewers, welcome along too. This is progressing along quite nicely now. I can't believe we're at day 8 already. So that's over a week now. But day 8, looking at 1997. So we've gone through my time in the Special Constabulary. We've gone through my time working through on section or response policing, as you like, the day-to-day, driving a Panda, being on the van, doing all those kind of things. And as we discussed yesterday, starting to get itchy feet, starting to look at what I might want to do, where I might want to progress. And we've done the sergeant thing and dipped. And we've applied for the dog section and not been paper sifted, gone, the rest of it. And the only other thing that was there in my mind, thinking something that I really want to do, was traffic. And that stems right back to being a probationer, where I had an accident file that I'd got and I needed to deal with, and I just kept pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back and not dealing with it and pushing it to one side. And eventually I turned up at the training sergeant's office, which was a police station in Wythenshawe, a tiny little place called Button Lane. And I went to the station there and I had sat down with him and said, I've got this accident file and I have absolutely no idea what to do with it. To cut a long story short, he rang his wife and said, I'm going to be late. I've got to, you know how it is. But I felt awful, but we sorted it out. I went off with a list of things I needed to do with it and I got them done. And that led to a traffic attachment at a later time that really opened my eyes to roads policing and how the traffic officers worked, and what I foresaw as something quite difficult actually was quite straightforward with the right mindset. Some people are in tune with roads policing. They're a natural fit. Some people find roads policing very hard. I can remember one of the lads on the traffic unit who was incredibly fast driver, but was also one of these people who spoke like he was the Iceman on the radio. And if you listen to how he was talking on the radio and then saw him go past, the two were completely incompatible. How can he be so calm and composed whilst driving like that? How can he do that? But there was one point where a CID lad, we'd been in a pursuit. This is out of sync with 97 really, but worth telling. And he was an out and out traffic man through and through. But there was a time where we were running with a detective in the traffic car, and they got in a pursuit with a Subaru, and it was all over South Manchester and through the city and into North Manchester. Loads of us got sort of close to and behind and following it and trying to get involved. And the detective I knew very well from being from my division. And by the end of this pursuit with this other lad driving, I turned up and he was stood there and he looked as white as a sheet. And he said, honestly, Neil, he said, take me to a murder scene. Somebody who's had their head chopped off, a body in a bin or a suitcase. He said, anything. He said, I can deal with that. I don't do fast. Really? But some people are in tune with traffic. Some people aren't. And traffic was the other thing that was on my radar. And in order to get into traffic, you needed to have an advanced car course. So I had to apply for an advanced car course. Now, things were standing in my favor at this point, because when I passed my standard car course, I was recommended for an advanced car course. So that it doesn't mean you're going to get one, but it pecks you up the list a little bit, because you're more likely to be successful at it. So I got my advanced car course, and that was in May 1997. In fact, I think I passed in May 1997, so it was probably April, May that I actually ran the course. I have to say, in 30 years of full-time policing and courses and qualifications and all the things that come with it, the advanced driving course was the most intense, hardest course I have ever done. It was also massively enjoyable because I love driving and I love cars. But the fact that whilst you're driving and the instructor's teaching and instructing and guiding you, and you're focusing completely on everything you do, in every gear change, every observation, every indication, the whole thing you're focusing on, the minute that you get out and sit in the back seat while somebody else drives, you're watching what they're doing. What mistakes are they making? What would you have done there? So it's a completely and totally focused day. And it was a 4-week course of driving, massively long course, very intense, but also thoroughly enjoyable. At this point, I had met my wife-to-be, and we had bought a house and we were living together. And I was completely switched off, zoned out, doing my advanced course. I can remember leaving home every morning and thinking, I'll see you later. And my whole day then was just completely focused. And then when you came home, you're reading Roadcraft and going through Roadcraft and looking at the principles of corners and bends and trying to get a grip of all this stuff that they're teaching you. A massively difficult course. However, it came to you do a check drive like you do on the standard car course. The check drive was fine, no problems, carry on. And at the end of the 4 weeks, you end up with your final drive. Now, unlike the standard car course, here you're actually trained in pursuits. You're trained how to manage pursuits, how to drive in a pursuit, how to give you commentary and all those kind of things. And they simulate a pursuit in your final drive. And this is quite nerve-wracking. So there were 2 cars on our course that were doing final drive. So that's 6 drivers. And each final drive is about an hour towards an hour and a quarter, an hour and 20 minutes. So you're full on intense. We all got in the cars and they drove us to the police station at Altrincham in South Manchester. We didn't drive. They drove us to Altrincham. We all get to Altrincham and they said, in fact, I'm not sure whether we actually paraded at Altrincham. Whichever way, we ended up at Altrincham Police Station on Barrington Road, for those who know Altrincham. We ended up at the police station there. They put us all in the recreation room, which had a snooker table and stuff. And they said, right, we'll be back in 20 minutes and then we'll get started. There was no order, no sort of who's first, who's last, no rest of it. 20 minutes later, they walked in the room and said, right, who's going first? There's deathly silence around the room. And Jenny, thank you. TPAC is not something that I was trained in. It came well after my time on traffic, but it's a massively useful tactic. And really, the guys who do it are really skillful in the way they manage that. So everybody sat there, stony faced, who's going to go first? Who's going to go first? Who's going to go first? I put my hand up, said, I'll go. And they all looked at me. Somebody had to go first, but they all, oh, blimey, why is he going first? Reasons I was going first. A, the instructors were and the examiners were fresh that day as I was. So we were all new to it. They weren't assessing my performance on failures that they'd seen on other people during that day. Maybe they'd assess me on failures they'd seen on people on previous courses, but not stuff that was immediately fresh in their mind. Secondly, I would rather sit in the recreation room all day wondering about how I did, rather than sit in the recreation room all day seeing the other people coming in going, oh God, it was awful, and thinking, I've still got to do that. Get it done, get it out of the way. So I went first. Went out, did the drive. The only thing that they pointed out to me afterwards, which one of the chaps who was an instructor in the other car, who'd been training the other car, who became, he left the driving school eventually and came and worked on the traffic unit where I was for many years, and he's a great friend. But he said to me, "Did you hear what you said on your commentary? Do you realise what you said on your commentary?" Now, when you're doing a pursuit, you have to give a commentary about where the car is, what it's doing, what you're doing, what you're passing, and all that sort of information. And he said, "Did you hear what you said in your commentary?" And I said, "No, what did I say?" And he said, "Double bends for half an hour." Sign said half a mile, obviously, but in the melee of everything, I said, "Yeah, there's advance warning, double bends for half an hour." And they all found it funny. I hadn't even realised I'd said it. But suffice to say, the final drive was completed. We then waited all day, and then they actually got us all out in the car park, stood us up in a line in the car park, and the inspector of the driving school then read out, and he said, "Constable so-and-so, class 2, pass. Constable so-and-so, fail. Constable so-and-so, class 2, pass. Constable so-and-so, class 1, pass. PC Smith, PC 6346 Smith, class 1, pass." I was absolutely delighted. Class 1 pass, the highest standard that you can get. Absolutely delighted to have got my class 1. And that was that. I went back to section. I got my authority to drive traffic cars, but I didn't have a job driving traffic cars. Short time later, vacancies were advertised, interviews were conducted, and I was selected. And a bit like the sergeant's process later, I was the last one. I was number 6 of 6 to get into the unit. So a few people got in before me, and then my opportunity came up. But they did come up quite quickly, to be fair, because I was thinking, crikey, I could be 1998 and summer 98 before I get into the traffic unit. I was like, really? No. It moved really quickly, because often what happens is that they'll get people lined, or at the time, they get people lined up for the traffic unit saying, right, we've got 6 people we can bring in, which means the 6 people on the unit who want to go, because they've got other opportunities, can now move on. So it sort of naturally progressed. So I got the memo, much like I got the memo for completing my probation. I got a memo that said, PC Smith will transfer to the traffic unit at Platt Lane from the 1st of September 1997. So really, it only took 4 months and I was in. At which point, I'm assigned a tutor constable again, because A, you're out in the cars and much more powerful cars, but B, you're also learning the ropes about how the traffic unit operates. I spent a couple of weeks with a guy that worked on my block, the same block as me on section, because my tutor was off. And then eventually my tutor came, and I then worked with him on a different block altogether. Great guy, lovely fella, had a really great relationship with him, and learned a lot about roads policing in those first few weeks. And then ultimately, you're not really signed off so much, but you just sort of say, yeah, you're fine, you can get going now. And then you rely on your own experience, your own knowledge, and the support of your peers as you start to develop your skills and experience. But fantastic time into traffic. What an amazing experience. Now, one of the things that we didn't particularly have allocated cars. We didn't have a car that was, that's your car, off you go. Because your car might be in the hands of somebody else when you come on who's tied up with something. So you have to go out in another car. But there was a certain amount of sort of flexibility, and mostly the whole team gravitated towards the same car when they could. So there might be in other cars, but most of the time they would be in the same car. And here, show a picture, is my first car. This was the first car that I had. There she is, the 722. And this, show that full screen for a second. This is a Ford Mondeo. It's a 2.5 litre V6 Ford Mondeo, and not widely loved within the traffic departments. But I actually really liked these. They weren't startling performance. They weren't incredibly quick. They weren't incredibly brilliant at handling. But what they actually did was they were predictable. If you did something with this car, it reacted in the same way all the time. And so they were quite reassuring in that regard. But there we go. The 722 was my first car. I really enjoyed having that car because it had got tracker in it, and it also had a decent video camera setup in it. But that was the first car that I really started to drive around in, and that was eventually written off. Now, just to sort of show what sort of affection these vehicles have with officers over the years, you talk to many officers that came before me, and they will talk about the 2.8 injection Ford Capris, loved them. They'll talk about the Sierra Sapphire Cosworths that we had, loved them. They'll talk about the Escort RS2000 and the 16-valve Astra GTE that was absolutely brilliant around the back streets of Wythenshawe. Awful on the motorway, but little tight streets and cut, turn, boom, like a skateboard on steroids. It was an amazing thing. They loved them, but they hold lots of cars in their affection. But just to show how much affection we hold these cars in, when that car was finally written off, I can't remember how it was written off, this one, now thinking about it, but something happened and it was written off. And I went to the workshops, and when I went to the workshops and spoke to the engineers, and I said, the 722, yeah. I took the registration number off it and said, can I have it before it goes to scrap? And they said, yes, you can. And they said, I said, I'm being a little bit sentimental. And they said, no, you're not. You're being a little bit simply mental. But there we go. The 722, my first traffic car that was really mine. And that's the registration plate from it. And it's been in my garage ever since, just up on the wall. And so an amazing time as I started to work my way into traffic. And of course, if you're dealing with roads policing, this is where my journey into roads policing and road safety really kicked off, and has led me to very much where I am now with Don't Assume and Drive and all the things that I do, and all my hopes for the future as I go into retirement and look at how I can help with road safety as well. Is that this really started the journey. And one of the things that you can't avoid as a new PC on the traffic unit is that sooner or later there is going to be a fatal collision, and it's coming your way. Because the lads on the department want you to pick it up, they want you to run with it, they want you to get that experience of dealing with that whole thing. Now, at this point, we didn't have family liaison officers. There weren't FLOs. The officer in the case did all the consultation and talking with the family and keeping them up to date with the investigation, ran the investigation, dealt with the suspect, the whole kit and caboodle, the lot. And in many regards, I actually enjoyed that, but I can see and understand the benefits of the family liaison officers and the massively valuable work and support that they do and give to families that have been bereaved on the roads. But my first fatal came in December 1997. It was in Charlton, dark evening, and a lady who was crossing the road. We think, and you'll never really know, it's one of those odd things about fatals, is there's always a lot of unknown factors, but we think that the lady had forgotten to collect her pension. She'd done everything else, but she'd forgot to collect her pension, so she dropped all the shopping back at home and was dashing back out to the post office to get her pension. And she crossed the road in the dark at a busy junction, and a car was coming down and just hit her. hadn't seen her, didn't know what had happened. Bang, dealt with it. Now, you'll remember from, let's have a look, right back to day 2, 1991, where I was with my first tutor constable, Chris Gibson. And if you watch that broadcast, you'll remember that he said, I said that the van stopped, and Chris said to me, here's 2 guys that will always help you out and look after you, lovely guys, Zuni and Oki. Now, Oki was Steve Oak, and that's a name that some of you may or may not know. But Oki had now gone on to the traffic unit and had been there for a number of years. And at that time, he was tutoring somebody else who'd also come to the traffic unit. And I can remember vividly that I was dealing with the scene and dealing with the traffic and dealing with the road closure and making sure that everything for accident investigation was okay. But the ambulance was still on scene, and Oki got his PC and said, "Open the ambulance door. In you go see what this is about," and all the rest of it. And that sounds awful. You sort of think, oh, they're just going in for a show and having a look. No, it's about understanding what this job is about as a traffic officer, because sometimes you face and have to deal with some really catastrophic injuries, and you have to be able to deal with that professionally, and that means you need exposure to them. But Oki was there, tutoring a young lad called John at the time, who's still in contact with me on Facebook, and a smashing lad. But yeah, that was Oki. He was there as well at the time, and he was on traffic quite a few years ahead of me, but he was an outstanding traffic officer. He's an outstanding cop, but an outstanding traffic officer. So 1997, there we go. That's really all I've got to tell you. But the interesting thing about traffic is that this became, even when I transferred to Cheshire, traffic is where my heart sits. Roads policing and the safety of people on the roads is something that just is embedded into you. And they say, once a traffic cop, always a traffic cop. And I feel now that I'm still a traffic cop. And sometimes I look back with regret and think, God, if I'd only stayed in traffic and only stuck with it and all the rest of it, but I moved further away from Manchester, and eventually transferring out had to be the only solution. But we'll get to that in 2005. So we've got a few years to go before that. But it became my new thing, and promotion and all that went out of the window because suddenly I was in a new role and I was loving it. And just to finish, I'll say that we've talked about the fact that holding your the job in affection and what it is you do. And we've got the registration plate, even when it's upside down. Got the registration plate of my first car. I've got photographs of all my other cars that were primarily mine. But something else I'm also very proud of, and something that I've got here at home and will stay with me here and until the day I die, and then my wife will probably throw it in the bin. But that's this. There is that is a very proud moment, and the fact that you've gone and you've got your white hat and you're there as a traffic PC. And that photograph was taken only this year. I took it out of the loft and took the photograph with it for this set of broadcasts. Very, very happy times on traffic. Initially, the team at the time was at Platt Lane Police Station, which traditionally, as we started out, was the D Division headquarters. If you remember, in 1991, we had a meeting with the chief superintendent, who in his office at Platt Lane Police Station, and his office later became the parade room for the traffic unit, because that station was slowly but surely being closed down. At the time, 1997, it was in full swing, had canteen, the whole lot, but it does eventually close down. But the traffic unit had moved from a building across the car park, a small house set of houses that were converted into sort of offices across the car park. Those were given up, and the traffic unit moved into the main building, and we were on the first floor in the chief superintendent's office. And we had all the cars outside on the car park, so it was like job on, run down the stairs, out the door, jump in the car, and woof, gone. Happy days. But it's not stolen, call me girl. I went to Openshaw, which is the workshops, and asked if I could have it, and they said, well, it's only going to auction and the scrap, so do whatever you like. So I took it because I wanted it. And I say it's been at home and been in my garage ever since. Anyway, that's it. 1997. Nothing really exciting. My first fatal, getting onto traffic. So big thing. It doesn't sound a lot, but they are huge things in my career, and the start that has led me to very much to where I am today, and defined a lot of my career. I'm definitely sure, call me girl, definitely. But there we go. That's it. Day 8, 1997. We'll call it a night at that one. I will see you tomorrow, day 9, 1998, where I'm starting to get involved in traffic and doing lots more stuff. We'll see what we can talk about tomorrow. Until then, take care, stay safe, have a lovely evening. I hope you have a nice weekend if you're off this weekend. But if not, I will see you tomorrow on day 9 for 1998. Take care, folks, and I will see you tomorrow. Good night.